like us, I think your end will just bite the bullet, because as a more stable economy, which is driving it here, the decisions now, it's not because it's safe, it's because the long-term damage is potentially greater. But you've got even less fat to play with than we have for that, because of the state of the South African economy. And I do think that, I do think, I mean, they'll never publicise it, but politicians in smoke-filled rooms are just ultimately saying, well, what's the price of keeping the economy going? And there will be a reasonably significant number of fatalities to, trade off against that.
That we're going to have to live with, yeah. No, I agree. How's it, Michael?
I mean...
Okay.
Hi, chaps. How's it going? Are we well?
Good. I see you've had a shave. Well, I wasn't on last week, so maybe you had it more recently.
No, it was looking a bit for a tricker for my tastes. Yeah, so gave it the chop, eh?
Okay, I took the shaver to my head.
I see that, yeah. I think we can get going. Just to reiterate, Dobbo, if you can take yours off mute, we're going to need to hear you. But everyone else, if you can just keep on mute unless you've got a question. And then if you're off mute, we can see that you've got a question, and we can work it that way. All right. So thanks a lot, and let's get going.
Dobbo, I gather it's a busy time for you at the moment.
Yeah, it's been busy. It is.
I don't know if anybody
Hey,
else.
Dobbo, how's it, Gav?
Sorry?
I'm just saying hello to you, Gav.
How's it, Craig? We'll be chatting to Dobbo, not to me.
How you guys?
Good.
Is the meeting not opened yet?
No, we're good. We're good to go, Gav.
Okay, no, it's just everybody's sitting there. Everybody's sitting there mute at the moment. Okay, well, for nobody else is going to start, I'll start. We've got 2 days to go till the cutoff for this ridiculous. Well, I think it's a ridiculous 21-day get out clause. Has there been any other developments that hasn't been in the media yet, and that might sort of have dented your confidence building up to that cutoff day?
It's a couple of elements to note. Real developments. I'm confident. I'm confident that everybody's going to stay. All our players, and I think other exposed unions, the Sharks, and hopefully all theirs as well, is they stay. I mean, there are some ethical or other concerns one's got around it, but the Western Province view is that even if a player was to exercise that option, we would, Western Province, regard it as unenforceable. We regard their contracts as still in place. That's obviously a level above me, but that's the Western Province view. My view is the coaches that the players are all staying, bar none.
Okay.
Gav, I haven't got any indication of anybody leaving, wanting to leave. The sort of flashpoints we've had conversations with. So my feeling is that everybody's staying.
But wouldn't it be the case that if somebody was leaving, they want to be paid up until Thursday? So they would leave it till the last minute anyway, wouldn't they? I mean, that's the way employees tend to behave in the workforce. I mean, not just rugby players.
I know that. Yeah, I know that's the big concern is the night of the 13th. I mean, it feels like we got into a football rugby. Has got into a sort of football style situation, sort of transfer deadline situation, which is unusual. That's probably one of the reasons why, not one of the reasons why, but Western Province recognizing this, not regarding this escape clause as particularly enforceable, would protect us a little bit were that the case, in terms of one could go a crazy route of getting interdicts or stuff like that if we felt that it was somebody tried to do that at the last second. Yeah, I don't think it'll come to that. I really don't expect anybody to want to leave. But I mean, I know Ed Coetzee was quoted last week, wasn't he, as saying that the 13th, and that would be their big concern there. So I could see his point.
Robert, did you actually have those conversations with guys like France and Peter Steff? Obviously, there's been a massive round of publicity around Peter Steff, but did you actually have those conversations with the players? Is that what you base your confidence on?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of the players, talked to a lot of their agents, and I think, you know, there's a certain sort of, you know, if a player was to ring up on the 30, there are two elements of sort of beyond the legal, I suppose more the ethical. If a player was to ring up on the 13th to say that he's leaving, he'd be making a massive breach of the sort of rugby trust that's within a squad, you know, and what we're trying to build. And, you know, he wouldn't be leaving with his reputation intact if a guy was to take us right to the wire and then leave and not give us even a chance to have a conversation. I know we aren't allowed to have a conversation around the money, but we could have another conversation around what his future is at the union and how we see it going forward and what we could do in the future when normality or whatever it is returns. So I think there's that element. The other element is, you know, rugby is meant to be a sport of high fair play and fraternity. And, you know, I think, you know, anybody feasting on the carcasses of other people trying to adapt to this virus is to my mind, it's against the ethical, it's exploitation, you know, of any, you know, whether it's almost a neo-colonialism. You know, if you've got a team at the bottom of Africa, of Africa with, you know, with a depreciating currency who've got certain constraints imposed on them, you know, in terms of clauses, you know, in terms of salary reductions, to me, it is a little bit like picking at the carrion. If you've got, whether you've got an angel investor or a very generous sponsor to come and pick on those players. And that's a, you know, concern for me would be that were this clause carried to its potential worst side, that we would be, you know, that we would become like a Fiji with the majority of our professional or players overseas, or the vast majority of our top players overseas. And that would be a concern. And I think clubs, I'll be honest, I think clubs that come and try, I know in South Africa, we luckily protect the clause. The one thing the clause does do right is preventing us from domestic transfers. I still think it's against the sort of spirit of rugby. They've got really bad COVID. South Africa, they've taken their rands, gone to rubbish. They're down their salaries by 40%. And we've got a very generous investor who wants to go and help themselves to World Player of the Year. That to me is against the spirit of what we need to be in this period.
It doesn't, but you've just spoken about the, you know, what disadvantages we have here, and you spoke about the end of Africa. I mean, doesn't that also just make it even more incomprehensible that we've put that clause in place? I mean, it's not the clubs over there who came and said, okay, we're going to have this clause. I mean, it's we who did that. I mean, that's what I can't understand.
No, fair point. I mean, I think Western Province have made their view on the clause, and there are fair questions that have been asked in the media and elsewhere about how we got to that clause. You know, I agree with you, Gavin. It was something that we put on ourselves. What worries me is in a slightly longer term is, I understand there was an attempt to rescue the industry, and which is well intended, but sometimes these things have unintended consequences. And one of which is, if we're going to recover as a rugby economy here and have a situation where we aren't a net exporter of players, we need a really good domestic tournament. And by domestic, I include Super Rugby. I know it might be international. We don't know what it's going to look like. But if you know, if there are only 7 or 8 Springboks in this playing in South African franchises, or 9, that product to me is much less marketable or commercial. So that would then lead to more players going to play in the more commercial, more lucrative markets, and becomes a slippery slope. So that is one of the consequences, I think, of this clause.
Robert, it's Lloyd here. Presuming everyone does stay, and you've held on to everyone by the end of the week, how will the pay cuts be unrolled? I mean, is that a process that's happened already? Has everyone kind of accepted their fates with regards to that? You know, presuming that you do get through this unscathed in terms of personnel.
Yeah, I think the players have been. I think my players have been since that Saturday a couple of weeks ago. They've been quite well communicated with. We got our own new dummy pay slips. I don't know if you got yours, Mike. We got ours. The coaches got theirs yesterday. It wasn't very pretty. So no, I think that's there's broad acceptance there's broad acceptance around that.
I just want to understand this properly, because the way I've always understood it is that the 40% pay cut comes in if there is no more rugby this year, and also it seems to be like the international rugby sort of carries us. So, but if we, which is what I think everybody's hoping for, if we get a sort of a domestic competition to go even behind closed doors, then I'm assuming that the salary cuts get adjusted because the guys are actually playing, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. I mean, you might have to ask somebody at My Players or SARugbymag, but my understanding is that the committee meets monthly, and then if we are, it readjusts it, so if, the players are certainly under the impression, put it this way, Gav, that if we start playing, they expect their salaries to return to what they were. Whether that's the case, but that's definitely the players' expectation. I've seen players saying, well, chaps, if we're on in July, we've only worn this for 2 months, we'll be okay, And I know that the basis of the injury cut was assuming no rugby to the end of the year. But the players expected they get on to go back to what they were.
Okay.
That's the case.
Okay. Even if there's no international rugby, because that's the sort of the understanding I'm getting is that the international rugby sort of carries the rest. Local
international rugby.
Okay. No, well, yeah, local. I'm talking about if the Box don't play. I mean, if the I was going to call it the Tri Nations. If the Rugby Championship didn't take place, that apparently would be a massive problem for SA Rugby, the organisation SA Rugby.
No, I don't know enough about that, but my feeling, yeah.
No, but that won't affect on you.
Local international rugby would affect that, I think.
Dobber, it's interesting that you mentioned that from province's side, if I understand you correctly, there's a legal aspect to the issue of the 21-day clause. I mean, do you actually consider someone who exercises the clause actually still under contract with province? How exactly does it work?
That's Steve. I think you have to get out of somebody from the board or the president. But the view that was our view is that our contracts remain in force over this period. That's the Western Province view that's the opinion that we have.
Sorry, Dobby, just to follow up on that, but I'm just trying to understand. So as far as I understand it, we've spoken about this before as well, is that Zelt actually, the CEOs, SARugbymag, agreed with it, and Western Province are bound by that. Does your legal view say something else?
No, Brendan, again, this is probably against my pay grade. Our view, and we have, as far as I know, conveyed this to SARugbymag, is that we can still enforce our contracts, but that would have to, again, that's a level above my standing. But that's the view of Western Province.
Oh, what do you make of the New Zealand tournament going ahead? I mean, that's just good news for everyone, surely.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. It's jealous as vipers, but we faced I think they've got a rate of under 10 or something, per day of new cases. So we appreciate we're way off that. I mean, it's nice. It gives us some hope, but I think it's a way off.
Oh, but on that, it feels like you guys are sort of a little bit like, I think, maybe the government is to some extent wasted time as well. It feels to me that you guys have spent so much time sort of worrying about this clause and whether the players are leaving and all that maybe you're not worrying about enough. There hasn't been enough focus on, and this is a sense I got actually speaking to Edward Coetzee last week as well, is that there's not enough focus on what we have to do to actually play rugby again. I mean, you have to jump through a heck of a lot of hoops to get rugby played again. And yes, New Zealand are going to start so they can be like the guinea pig, just like the Premier League, just like the Bundesliga, for instance, being the guinea pig for the Premier League. And you can follow on from what happens in New Zealand. But I mean, has there been any sort of move from your side towards getting to start putting things in place that you'd have to do, like the whole new world if you do return to rugby, you know, basically to sort of jump through those hoops you need to jump through, if you know what I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah, I see your point about us focusing on this period. What was we have done all the World Organization and the World Rugby, so you know, to make our facilities right. We've done the COVID implementation plan. Our players are doing online COVID certification course as we speak. So we are planning. The problem is actually more a practical one for us, is in terms of conditioning. And when we started this lockdown after that last round of Super Rugby, when we played the Sharks, we were looking at 3 weeks and then getting back to work. So you had to keep the guys at, let's say, level 8 of physical preparedness, you know. And now we're having to take them right down. So our challenge is going to be, there was a formula of, you know, of 2 to 1. So if you were off for 2 weeks, you would take 1 week to get ready to play again. And now I think that's been dramatically extended by the fact that we've now, as of this week, had a full traditional pre-season, or off-season, sorry, not pre-season, off-season. So we're now going to need a full pre-season. So that's where we're probably not as prepared. You know, we were keeping theirs on a short readiness. Now we're pulling them right back to looking at more musculoskeletal, the long-term strength stuff, you know, not in terms of their conditioning, in terms of ready to play rugby gap. So that, but in terms of the facility and that stuff, we are preparing. But I mean, that's, you know, we all know that it's going to be a government thing. I mean, we can speculate and everything as much as we like. The problem is, just by the length of the layoff and the prognosis in South Africa, it's going to be a full, you know, we're going to have almost a full pre-season before we're ready physically to play again.
Although, do you know how the competition would work in terms of a South African domestic event? Would it have to be under the Super Rugby banner? So, for example, would the Cheetahs and Kings be able to join, or would it have to only be the Super Rugby sides?
Well, I think Pro 14, didn't they come up, as Martin, you know more than me, Pro 14, didn't they come up with an August or September return? My gut, my feeling is that, you know, and there was a strong argument that we had to play Super Rugby because of the, you know, the commercial rights around that. But the way we're going, it's hard to see us starting, you know, even deeper. I would have thought even July would be a good, you know, so it's, and then still squeeze a Currie Cup in. No, so I think it's looking more and more like it's going to be a big Currie Cup going in late in the year. I'm not, you know, whether that's the way. I just don't see how you can play their version of us. If we start later, much later, how we would play a Super Rugby tournament, or that tournament that you said with the Kings and the Cheetahs, if they're going to go off to Super Rugby, so that's them out. Then what are we going to play a Super Rugby thing in August, September, and then go and play a Currie Cup after that, and then hopefully still get some internationals. So I think our options are becoming more and more limited. I'm not sure that one's still on the table, but I've heard nothing. That's my speculation.
In terms of the players getting back on the field, is there a concern from them with regards to the COVID virus? And actually, we see that happening in English soccer now, that players are speaking out that they have a concern that they're returning too early. Are there talks about that could be a concern?
No, the players' stress now is purely around, you know, not having meaning and uncertainty like all of us and like everybody else in society. They're not too concerned about the COVID. Our concern about the disease itself will be purely practical, in that, you know, do we train, if we go into competition, do we play with 2 different squads? You know, so you have one squad that's clean, if you know what I mean. So if you get an infection, you can still honor the fixture of next week. So, you know, you might have a white and a blue team. The white team trains separately. The white team, you know what I mean, the white jersey team, they play separately, and never mix with the blue team, because otherwise if you get one infection in your main team, that whole 23 are out for the next week, you know, or for next 2 weeks. So, you know, we might have to stack it. That would be our concern, you know, in terms of trying to protect the players like that. They haven't expressed any concern with me yet about that.
John, it's
Karen Martin.
Can I be correct there, Gav? John, it's Martin Gillingham, a blast from the past, and calling from north of the equator. So that helps guide you where I'm coming from here. I wouldn't say you've been strident in your views, but you've certainly been quite passionate about the importance of players staying in South Africa. And because of the unique situation you're in, particularly over the course of the next 24, 48 hours, do you think it's about time World Rugby in these unprecedented times actually stepped in and helped you a little? Imposing some sort of moratorium.
I would have thought a moratorium, Martin, it would be a brilliant idea, an absolutely brilliant idea. And we almost needed to have a domestic one. And in a funny way, we've got one about the inter-union movement during this lockdown. But, you know, you've got a situation where in the rugby championship, you've got the eighth ranked team and the 11th ranked team, which is quite, you know, which skews the rugby championship. Argentina will become increasingly an exporter like they used to be. Fiji and the Pacific Islands are an exporter. And we certainly don't want to be in the same category. So I think for the good and the balance of world rugby, I know a moratorium would be very clever to let us find our feet, you know, because our revenue models are under such pressure and the exchange rates. I think it would make a lot of sense for Southern Hemisphere rugby and the balance of world rugby.
Because
England and France.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I mean, you used words like exploitation. Now, I'll be honest, I wouldn't mind being exploited for a sort of €1 million a year or whatever Peter Steptoe is or isn't being offered. But the reality is, any reasonable person would have absolute sympathy with your view. And in these unique times, it does appear that we do need a unique measure. And anybody who's observing global rugby at the moment would say, I think south of the equator needs a favour or two from the world rugby at the moment.
I agree with you. Maybe exploitation is the wrong word, because, as you said, the player would be a willing participant. It wouldn't be rape.
Yeah.
And I would never, if that Peter Steph thing had been true, I would never have faulted him on getting on an aeroplane for €1 million. But I think what we desperately need is time for rugby to find its feet. You know what I mean, and to get settled. It's, you know, we're running businesses where you don't know where the next rand is coming from in terms of revenue. You know, there's not a spectator buying a seat. I presume there's some people asking for their suites or their season tickets back. You know, this thing gets passed down the chain. So I think there should be a period of rugby allowed to adapt and find its feet, and before we. So I think it's a really good idea, Martin.
Just on that, I mean, your view obviously is very much looking at your own situation, but it doesn't help, I suppose, that Rassie and SA Rugby are quite open that they quite enjoy the fact that Springboks are playing overseas, because it brings more players through on this side.
Yeah, I mean that's the complete counter argument, which I do have I completely understand. What is worrying me, Brennan. And it's not my job, and again, I'm probably in lots of this conversation gone out of my lane, is that we need a strong commercial product here to keep any players. You know, we've all seen over the last 3 or 4 years the amount of schoolboys, the twinning deals with Montpellier between Black and Grey, the amount of schoolboys. We just got one back in Cade Waluta. But the amount of schoolboys going overseas, the average age of South Africans playing overseas is dropping from 29 to 24, something like that. So our domestic product, just the commercials of the domestic product, is what worries me. What happens to our franchise? Like, I'm wearing a Stormers hat now. What happens to our franchise here, our sponsorship, our revenues, if we're playing with, you know, 22-year-olds who people don't know? And that surely then that chases us towards becoming a net exporter. I just think for our rugby industry here, for all of the guys on this, with the exception of Martin, everybody on this call, we need a healthy, robust industry. So I think, you know, I do understand the argument brings guys through, but I'm into what? Into a time when we're going to play, let's say Super Rugby falls away and it becomes too expensive to open Greenpoint for a local game against the Bulls. You know what I mean? I'm not sure that's how we want to end up. You know, so it's a very, very tricky balancing act. You know, what actually happened serendipitously over the last 4 years was probably perfect. Open it up and got ready for a World Cup, you know, and up until then the guys were competing. You know, but there's also a counter argument to doing that every time, because what about the guys who are loyal and stay here for 2020, 2021, 2022, and 23? We bring back the overseas guys. But maybe those guys in 2020, 2021 and 2022 are playing, burst themselves into the Springbok team. But I'm just worried that we don't have we're going to be like old Mother Hubbard in terms of not having a high-level competition in South Africa. That's what worries me.
Dobbo, Dudley here. Just in terms of training, do you guys know at which level you will be able to do team training? And also, have your injured guys started rehab at the High Performance Center yet?
Yeah, I'm not sure the level we start training. I know that I've seen what they did in La Liga and the Bundesliga models, that we go individual on opposite sides of the field. So 2 guys on a field, and then go into stack training, which is groups of 7 or 8, and then probably go into the 2 squad system. But that's I'm not got no clue when that starts. There's talk of level 1. I know the PSL have been talking about maybe level 2, trying to get permission for level 2 for them to start playing behind closed doors. But our guys are rehabbing, and now we've got the HPC certified, so we start the rehab process. If you remember, all those big, there's another point I'm going to raise now, but all those big guys, those big injuries we had were all 3 to 4 month injuries from February, March. So they're all coming back online now. I think the last guy is Peter Steff at the late June, or Kitsi late June. So they're all getting towards the stage where they need to be physioed and even starting to do some field rehab. So they're all coming on the strength now. I'm interested to know, we've got a couple of players, I know the Sharks have as well, going to Europe, are meant to be leaving after the end of Super Rugby, which would have been the 30th of June. So I presume I'm sure those guys are still going. I don't know what happens to, so we will be without, Dylan Lates, Will Colo, Jamie's already gone. So those guys won't be available for whatever competition and I presume Andre Estes and the Sharks won't be, assuming those contracts are all in place from 1st of July.
Are there flights to take them anywhere?
Hopefully there's one from Durban to London, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was asking Dylan, when are you leaving? And he doesn't, I don't know. So I'm not sure what happens. I mean, I know it's a massive issue on the contracting, what happens if Dylan can't go to France and we stop playing? Do we then keep him for longer? Does a transfer fee of any form fall away? I'm not sure.
Well, have they decided that they're starting a new season, or are they going to continue with the current season?
We got Mr. France on the call here. He'll tell us.
No, France have formally abandoned this season.
Okay, but the UK hasn't.
No. The UK, because of what's going on in the last, gone on here in the last 48 hours. I mean, I'm playing golf tomorrow. I don't want to feel too envious, but we're slowly, right, in a state of panic and confusion, returning to something like normal. And there is a possibility that English rugby may resume behind closed doors, professional rugby that is, in July. Big question mark. But France has formally abandoned all first and second division football, all first and second division rugby. And the plan in France is to resume rugby in September with a new season. European rugby is still holding on to try and complete the current season, which is down to the last 8 in the Champions Cup, and to do that in October. Big question marks about that. But essentially, France will not be starting a new season until at least September.
Okay, well then my question really is that surely those players who are going to the UK and not to France. France, obviously, they're starting a new season. But even if it was October, if they were continuing last season, surely their contract should be adjusted to
well,
reflect that.
It's a big question mark. And the other point is we've now introduced, I mean, after 3 months of letting in all and sundry more than 100,000 people a week at the airports with no checks or temperature checks, we've suddenly now introduced a 14-day quarantine period. So anybody coming from overseas into the UK, if they can get a flight, has to sit somewhere in a hotel room at Heathrow Airport for a fortnight, which I wouldn't wish on anyone.
Okay.
So, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm supposed to be coming to the Cape next month, and I'm not sure my flight will be operating. Okay. So I shouldn't think they'll be going back the other way, will they?
Yeah. I don't think Dylan's going to be leaving in July, Dobbo.
That's great. That's great.
Thanks for confirming that, Kevin.
Not to.
All right, guys, do we have any more questions for Dobbo or more for Martin?
Last one from me, Mark. Can I give you one more?
Good to chat, fellas.
No, thanks, Martin. Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing I wanted to get across is that rugby really does need a chance, like you suggested, Martin, to find our feet. We'll probably get through I think somebody commented in the week, the escape clause may well, touch wood, turn out to be of no consequence in the end, in the practical end. And we just need some space to sort of find our feet. I think it's unhealthy if we're going to be competing and driving prices up and all this sort of thing at this stage where we don't know where our next cent's coming from. So let's hope we can find our feet. And let's see.
Stephen, you've got a question.
Yeah, Dobbo, you were mentioning Dylan Lates earlier, and you've always kind of had a soft spot for Dylan. I'm referring to him as your talisman and so on. Is it very emotional for you to lose Dylan in a way like this? It's just it just feels blunt for a guy that you've always had a very sort of high regard for. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that could lead us on another chat, but both him and Walker Lowe, both Springboks, have both been really good servants to us. Dylan especially, goes back to playing, probably been in the system for about 10 years, other than a year at the Force. So the fact that they could have played their last game for the Stormers is very sad, which probably brings us on to what could happen in Newlands still this year. So let's hoping. I wouldn't mind if they did stay a bit longer so that we could play a game and say goodbye to them, but that's emotional and less important at this stage.
But what is happening to the sort of farewell? I mean, I know you had something planned in November. Are you guys still going ahead with plans for that?
No, I mean, we have to. I mean, we haven't really got. There's not a sort of. We're not like we haven't not paid our rent and have to move out. I mean. That could be moved. I think there's Mike probably know more than me, but there's a real desire to say it could. I mean, at some stage there would be some form of decent farewell to Newlands, unless there's a no.
Look, I think the point is it's very difficult for anyone to make plans about anything right now until we know how this is all going to unfold and the timings around, the pandemic and the government regulations in South Africa. But that being said, in terms of Newlands, nothing's really changed. There's still plans to have a final game, and there's still plans to play our rugby at Cape Town Stadium next year. So from that point of view, we have to see how it happens. But as we stand now, it's the same plan. Dobbo, was there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, we're good. We're good. I mean, it could all change on, as somebody said, on Thursday night. But I just really wanted rugby to be a sense of time of fraternity now, rather than trying to take advantage of the situation.
All right, great. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Appreciate that. And as I say, I'll send the recording out on the broadcast list so you can all have a look at it.